The route to the top. How to become a group company secretary. Welcome to the Better Boards podcast series, the podcast for chairs, CEOs, non-executive directors, company secretaries and their advisors. Every episode is filled with practical insights and learnings from those inside boardrooms. We discuss what really matters and highlight actionable steps you can take to enhance your board's performance. In this episode, we look at the company secretary profession. It becomes increasingly competitive, and so we thought we explore what it takes to get to the top and what separates those that are able to secure top positions from those that feel challenged. We all know that the role, there are more and more demands on it. The scope is ever increasing. So what is required is to really prioritize, live with the changes, and somehow balance behavioural, technical, and influencing skills. I'm delighted to speak with Glenn Oborne and Connor Sims. Both are directors of Ingen Partners. Our listeners in the UK will know the two because they are in this profession for a long time. Together they have around 20 years of experience, and they are really in the midst of the company secretarial community in the UK. They have seen rises and falls in the governance job market and have kept up with the ever-changing trends in requirements from businesses to add to their secretariats, as well as the challenges faced by individuals at different stages of their career. Glenn and Connor, thank you so much to both of you for contributing to the Better Boards podcast series.
Pleasure. No, nice to be here, Sabine.
Thanks for having us on.
Lovely to have you guys. Let's jump straight in. You hear quite often that people complain that in every company, of course, there's only one top spot. Everyone who enters the profession, of course, tries to get to the top, become a group company secretary. But as we said, there's only one top job. What does it take to really make it to this top spot?
Well, I think with it, a lot of people, they see that as the pinnacle of their career, right? And that, is the top role. But I think the way we look at it is that there are no two roles in governance that are the same. There are no two businesses that look at things the exact same way. I think the best way I've kind of come to look at it is everyone's reading the same rule book, right? But each business, each company is often reading it in a different language. So they have their own interpretation and adoption of what corporate governance means for them. I think the key skills that kind of group company secretaries should aspire to having, is around, those core deliveries for corporate secretariat. So annual reports, AGMs, support on transactional ongoing subsidiary governance work, board and committee work. But I think the big thing, that differentiates those that achieve that top role is their ability to influence. So, we get asked quite regularly, how do we get that? How do you start learning that? And it's one of those areas of the market where there's no textbook for it. It is through experience. So typically we attribute a value to the role, whether it be a group company secretary, whether it be a deputy, on their proximity and ability to engage. It's advising the key stakeholders of that business. How close are you to them? How much do they listen and engage in kind of what you're doing to support them? And it fundamentally comes down to then your ability to influence and guide them to making decisions on obviously that impact on behalf of the business.
But you said, no two roles are the same. And this also sounds to me that it's really important, not only that you look at the package, what you get and the name of the company, but you are fit into the culture and with the people.
Yeah, no. That's quite right, Sabine. I'm sure you know better than us. Each board, each business, they operate in different ways. So it's then, the job of the company secretary to be, reticent of that. I like to look at, the best company secretaries out there being chameleons. Your board is made up of very different members. Everyone's got a different background and journey to how they became to where they are today. So it's really the role of the company secretary to be able to have a a wide array of hats to put on when dealing with different stakeholders, different departments, because they all have different expectations on what they need from you as the company secretary.
So what I'm hearing quite often is that company secretaries, there's so much that they have to do to consider, more and more regulation coming in, more and more paperwork to do. And then in order to develop the relationships, it takes, of course, time. And I know for a fact that some are really struggling finding the right balance between basically getting all the stuff done, and basically developing the relationships that allow you at the end of the day to basically influence, have an impact, and progress in your career.
Yeah, I think it is quite tough to change the mindset, because up to a certain point within your career, what separates you from the rest of your peer group is going to be your technical ability and potentially your years of experience. But then all of a sudden you have to try to start thinking, actually, is what kind of impact I'm having. And I suppose typically what individuals rely upon a bit more is, if they've got a team, to start delivering on it, having that trust to, I trust my assistant, my co-sec assistant, are going to keep me out of trouble here and actually deliver on this. And I can focus on what's becoming an increasingly important part of my job, which is keeping my chair and keeping my CEO happy.
So what is it? What are you seeing in the candidates? And I mean, you have an amazing overview for our international listeners. In the UK, you're really part of that community for years and years. What separates, in your view, the people who manage to progress and get this top job from those that are struggling and get stuck or even leave the profession?
I think it really comes down to, I mean, we'd be silly not to mention luck, Sabine. The number of individuals that have achieved that role as group company secretary have been the right place, the right time. Someone's left and there's been a struggle to hire perhaps, or they've, already had those relationships. So it's then a natural decision of that board to then promote from within. But I think it really drills down to what we see in terms of the best company secretaries is that, they'll probably be the first to tell you they are not their today technical experts. They have really got the battle scars of dealing with challenging stakeholders, and, they are in a position where their voice is heard, Sabine. And I think it's through, those knockbacks, those mistakes, sometimes, they've never been afraid to fail. So maybe they've gone to their finance department and approached something in the wrong way. So it's their ability to learn from all engagements that they have, good, bad, and indifferent, to then really kind of expand their toolkit. And I think the point I made earlier, no two roles are made and created the same. So, if you have a chair and a chief executive or CFO that are strong advocates for good governance, then, that makes the company secretariat's role and function, it's so much easier to have that buy-in and so much easier to, deliver on those projects on the periphery that then, really kind of amplify and highlight and spotlight what the co-sec team should be doing. So, when we look at them, it's their ability to be a chameleon. It's their ability to engage with anyone and everyone in terms of kind of what they do, but also acting as a translator of, here are the regulatory kind of roadblocks, hurdles, and it's kind of navigating them. It's like being a bit of a captain of a ship, right? It's knowing when to to miss the storms, and then sometimes you've kind of got to fly into them head first, right?
So, when you were saying about what separates the people who make it to the top and those that don't, there's one additional dimension now coming in, which is AI. Somehow very surprised. It's a conservative industry, but the way company secretariats have embraced AI was really a surprise to me, because they really do and make use of AI in order to cope with the sheer volume of work what they have to do.
Yes, we've seen really good adoption of AI through a bunch of more senior individuals that we've spoken with on the market. And I think you are right. There is potentially a reputation for some, I don't know, trepidation when it comes to tech rollouts. But I think with more recent AI toolkits, there seems to be a bit more buy-in. I think that's potentially a little bit market-led, as in the past 2 years, we have seen cutting costs being increasingly at the forefront of some of the companies that we're dealing with's minds. And this is seen as a bit of a mechanism, a bit of a strategy for trying to deal with the large volume parts of work. But I would also say there seems to be a bit of a limit as to what companies are willing to use AI for. So I think if it's something that's, like I say, large volume based or repetitive, or if it's something that's checking referencing for certain documents, that kind of thing, absolutely there is the appetite to use AI where possible. But when it's things that are a bit more confidential in the boardroom, when it's things like getting board packs together, I think there's limited use of it, particularly in the minuting sphere, because if companies were happy with minutes being taken verbatim, essentially, then they would be recording meetings with tape recorders, and we've had technology for that for years. I think what it helps is in generating first drafts and in making things a little bit neater, but the actual content and making sure things are right, that's always going to land with the company secretary. And I think this is now an increasingly important part of the group company secretary role in understanding how we're going to use it and what the strategy is going to be, what the limits are going to be.
So putting it all together, I mean, it's like you need to be this social person, with a high emotional intelligence in order to basically develop trust. You need to be very good in understanding the technicalities of your job, and you need to be tech savvy. Now, that is a fantastic wish list for Christmas, but not everyone will be strong on all these three areas, will they?
No, I think it is, as Connor mentioned at the beginning, no two roles are made the same, and there is going to be a sweeping range of priorities from business to business. So I think with your large regulated businesses, for example, they're going to potentially want somebody who's got big team management experience, who's got tech rollout, because there might be a corporate restructure around the corner. But then you might be looking at a group company secretary role with a FTSE small cap or with a FTSE 250 business, or with a business in Europe that's got a bit more of a regional focus, and they might have a tricky board. So somebody who's got a bit more of that soft skills, who can manage the big egos on the board, who can manage a difficult chair, that goes to the top of the wish list. I don't think there's anyone who's got 10 out of 10 marks in every space, but it's genuinely a case of horses for courses, I think, when it comes to finding the right person for the role. And essentially, more often than not, that's where Connor and I's job comes in understanding a business says they want everything. What they actually need are this, this, and this, because these projects are coming up. This is the kind of profile, this is the kind of individual that we need to contact in order to make sure it's as successful an assignment as possible.
But on the side of the candidate, it also requires that they understand where their strengths and limitations are, doesn't it?
100%, Sabine, and that's very much the kind of consideration that goes into how you build and structure a team. So, the best advice I was given years ago was, when I set up my business was, you write a job description for someone else being all of the things either you aren't very good at or don't want to do or haven't done before, right? So when you look at defining where and what a team does, we're seeing it now increasingly with the larger FTSEs in terms of having dedicated individuals looking at tech adoption and tech performance within the Secretariat. Then you have specialist individuals purely focused on subsidiary entity governance compliance work. You then have people looking at specific business areas. So, it's very much you're not expected as a group company secretary to have the answers for everything, but it's then, knowing when to delegate, it's knowing when to take things off of your plate. And if, I'm not particularly tech savvy, I wouldn't be the individual at Ingen Partners that would do the rollout of a new CRM. That would be very much Glenn's forte. So, you've got to know when to kind of almost step away, and this then kind of talks more broadly to just general kind of management, right? Is knowing where your strengths are, knowing where your weaknesses, but in essence then building a team and function that then allows you as the group company secretary to do the things you are there to do, your key areas, but also, got to remember the element of enjoyment. What are the things you enjoy the most? Do you want to start upskilling yourself on tech adoption and rollout? Well, great. Then the key to always getting better at stuff is to hire someone more informed, better than you, and that can kind of bring you along with that journey. So I think, it's certainly looking at how a team's structured and what they do then to complement the kind of the whole organism that we see.
Can you get our listeners maybe some ideas what really matters at the different levels of that journey of a company secretary?
Sure. I think you've got to remember employees are looking for different things at different levels. So when you start with your career, it's a bit more behavioural based. When you're trainee starting out, people are interested in what your work ethic's like, what your productivity's like, whether you're going to be a sponge, your ability to learn. And then it develops into a bit more of a technical role, or what employers are looking for is more of a technical person. And by that, I mean somebody who's got, they've worked on this section of the annual report. They know how to roll out an RNS announcement. They've worked with an FCA-regulated entity before. It's a bit more specific, and it's a skill set that they're hiring. This is typically where things like the qualification tends to come in. Mm-hmm. And then, as we've mentioned, what you're developing and what companies are looking for is that influencing skill set on both verticals. So it's your ability to influence a team, to lead a team. I think typically some businesses tend to call this value alignment or something like that. But for our benefit and how we tend to, pitch it to people that we're discussing with in the broader market, it's that influencing, that ability to move point A to point B, to have an impact. All these good things tend to be the skills that you develop, but you only really need to develop them at the mid to later stage of your career. I don't think no one's going to be expecting a trainee company secretary to be able to influence a team and influence a board from day one. They expect them to work as hard as possible, essentially, and pick things up. So it's that ability to know what the currency is at different levels of a career.
But I think with that as well, Sabine, it's not linear. It's kind of really looking at, when you kind of get to, let's say, the deputy level, right? So then at the deputy level, your key three areas are, as we said before, it's delivering what's needing to be delivered, AGM, annual report, all of that fun stuff and all of the process that goes around that. It's then, your ability as a manager. So typically then, our recommendation is for people to have 3, 4, maybe even 5 in some instances, deputy roles where you are testing yourself in the other areas. So it's team management. So you may start as in a smaller organization with less headcount. You then, take on more of a managerial kind of resource management. Are you managing your own P&L, for example? These are all things to take into consideration to prepare you for that. But then, like you say, it's then the ownership piece around board and committee work. Are you secretary to one or several or all committees across the business? Are you, close to the chief executive, the chair? Do you report into a general counsel and company secretary? It's something we haven't really touched upon, but, from a technical perspective, there is an expectation then for a senior deputy to be on all things governance. So, it's all of these things where you then are slowly kind of progressing to it being your team, your responsibility, your function. And I think these are all the things to kind of consider, as people are developing. I think a lot of individuals kind of worry that they stagnate that deputy level. Well, the only way you're going to be stagnating is if you're either not moving or not getting what you want from that role, because I can assure you, because of how different each business is, a different deputy role will get you a step closer, but it's just, it's more kind of not baby steps, but it's then identifying, okay, well, what is it every group company secretary has? And it can sometimes take several deputy roles for you to kind of have everything ticked off. I'm not saying the recruitment exercise is a tick box exercise, but if you can turn around and say you have done everything and more that the current individual that you are often replacing is doing, then fantastic. And that gives you the best opportunity.
I think Connor touched upon something there that's I think people do often neglect, is that you need a different network at different levels of your career, and you have to have your hiring manager is going to change. When you're starting off, it's a deputy or group co-sec. By the end, it's a GC or a chair or a NED or a CEO. And that also goes with the recruiters. Like at the beginning, it's more the boutique agencies. By the end, you might have to talk to some of the headhunters and the search firms to keep you updated with what's happening in the market. So it is a different network of individuals that you have to keep in touch with. I don't think you ever drop off people that you knew at earlier stages, but you have to bolt on more, because it's essentially what used to be your peer group probably stays as your peer group, but also gives you access to people that might want to join your team. And then at the more senior level, they might let you know, oh, so-and-so's starting to think about moving on. It might be worth you talking to this Ned that you worked with in the past. And I think more often than not, people do forget to keep in touch with their Neds and keep in touch with their chairs that they've worked with previously. But so many times we've been working in a process and they are the source for someone's next job, or they're the first point of call when they're thinking about, oh, we need a company secretary. You say, oh, I remember working with so-and-so at somewhere 5 or 6 years ago. We should get in touch with them and see if they'd be interested in joining us. It's such an easy way to keep on top of what's going on and set things up for your future career.
Fantastic. I'm looking at the clock here, and sadly we have to come to an end. And at the end, I always ask this very mean question. So what are the 3 things our listeners should take away from this podcast?
I think one of the key things from my side is, it's going to sound strange, but stop looking. You can look for group roles till you're blue in the face, and they will often land in your lap. So focus on building out your network with the likes of us, with, your exec search firms that are out there, connecting with your old Neds, as Glenn makes the point. They're going to be the source of these types of roles. So really kind of drill down on not what it's who you know. So it's who can you be in front of, who can you be talking to.
Yeah, I'd say invest in yourself and invest in your network.
I've got one more as well. Sorry, it's we'll get it out really quickly, but invest in the next generation of talent as well, Sabine. It is increasingly worrying at the lower levels to the opportunities that are being given. So, it's a very different market to those at the level, deputy group that were, however long ago. So really, if you have an opportunity to sponsor or support someone or mentor someone or, give everyone that kind of helping hand, this governance community that we're part of is fantastic at that. And I think, it is all about lifting each other up, right? So if you ever see an opportunity or have an opportunity to do that, do it.
Yeah, push the ladder back down when you're done.
Fantastic, guys. It was a joy talking with you. I hope our listeners, or I trust our listeners, got lots of little nuggets here, how they can develop their career as a company secretary. Thank you so much for contributing to the Better Boards podcast series.
Thank you for having us, Sabine.
Thanks, Sabine, for having us.
Cheers.
It's been great.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to hear and see more of what we do at Better Boards, if you would like to see a demo of our board evaluation platform, if you are interested in potentially joining us, or if you would like to see that we cover a certain topic in our podcast series, please reach out. We are always happy to hear from you. You can best reach us at info@better-boards.com. Thank you.